Now I want to move on to two more religions, which are pretty much almost the same, but yet somewhat different. They're both pretty much, what is the word I'm looking for? Placed in China. Both are born out of ancient Chinese religions. Confucianism focuses on I-N-T-E-R. It refers to or focuses on human relationships. Taoism, which is spelled Taoism, and a lot of people calls it Taoism, it's really Taoism, emphasizes the relationship between humans and nature. Let's talk about ancient religious views. Book of Changes, first thing out. It has a worldview that might be categorized as organismic and as organismic. Every single component of the cosmos belongs to an organic whole. What does that mean? Everything interacts with everything else. That's what they believe. There is no creation myth, and there is only an original state of undifferentiated chaos. Okay, there are two polar but complementary energies known as qi, which means breath, energy, and force. And these energies are merged. Breath, energy, and force. Breath, energy, and force are merged. One is called yang, and it's the south-facing, sunny side of the mountain. The other is called the yin. We refer to it as the yin-yang, and it's a big part of some kind of a rise in jewelry that people tend to like. These two together represent the concepts of day and night, male and female, hot and cold, and they interact continuously and ceaselessly to create a myriad of things in the process. And what it really does, it kind of reminds people that nothing exists. Nothing exists outside of the cosmos. According to both religions, there is no almighty creator. It is more of a procreation or the giving of birth. There's no creating from nothing. This gives humanity a sense of release from guilt. Okay? The main emphasis is on humanity and balance. Disharmony and imbalance are the true culprits. Harmony and balance are exactly what these two religions are looking for. The entire cosmos is involved in this ceaseless flow of alteration and change. So, let's talk about the teachings of Confucianism. All humans have a body. The physical manifestation of the interplay of the yin and the yang make up the body. But even that is subdivided into two parts, the hun, H-U-N, and the po, P-O. Hun represents the yang, which is the light, pure side, and po represents the yin, which is the darker side. And these two came together in the fetus and during gestation to make the spiritual aspect of the person. They do believe in the spiritual world of God, ghosts. And what they really believe is that at death, as long as these energies remain as hun and po, the spirit of the deceased remains and the spirit of the deceased lingers here. When one dies at a ripe old age, the spirit may stick around as a shen, S-H-E-N, which is the power that helps those who are still living. The ones who die tragically or die prematurely become a kui, Q-U-I, which means a vengeful, evil ghost. There are some political implications. Shangdi, S-H-A-N-G-D-I, was the Lord on high during the Shang dynasty. Di was the power of the Shang king to rule with authority. The Zhao dynasty gave a different name to the highest deity. The Shangdi became Tian, or the force above. And according to them, Tian was the source of all things, not as creator, but as procreator. Tian was not moved by blood ties or sacrifices. Tian really insisted on moral uprightness as a reward for political authority. The king was to rule on Tian's behalf as a morally upright person. Tian's working in nature and the human world comes through Tao, T-A-O, Tao, or the way, or the path. It is the Tao of Tian that brings order and regularity in nature and human society. The Emperor of Japan was not only a political leader, he was also a religious figure. He was an intermediary of Tian. The emperor had to maintain favor with Tian through what was called Li, L-I, rituals, in which this world that would convince Tian that the emperor was moral. Let's talk about Confucianism. Chinese refer to the teachings of Ru, R-U, which means scholars. Confucius brought these teachings to prominence and gave it a religious meaning, but in truth, he was not the founder, nor was he worshipped as a supernatural figure. There was something called the Analects of Confucius. They took various religious views and came up with his most important works, which are the Linyu, L-U-N-Y-U, or comments and sayings. In it, Confucius made his comments and sayings on religious texts. As we used to say when I was a kid, Confucius say. It takes a fresh and innovative understanding of Tian, if you will. Tian means a relationship between humans and Tian, especially for the morally elite people. Tian of Confucianism was more intimate. To Confucius, Tian reached out not just to rulers, but he also reached out to other people, not just feudal lords, but to people. Tian reached out to moral and noble people from all backgrounds. He wanted to establish a moral order that existed. Tian allows prospective people to detect the commands of Tian, making that person an obedient messenger through whom morality is spread and eventually uplifts society. Tian, in the Analects of religious authorities, Tian in the Analects is clearly the highest religious authority, but unlike Moses and Muhammad, Confucius did not see himself as a messenger of the personal God. The content of Tian's imperative is the Tao, again, the T-A-O. Tian wishes to convey to the spiritually elite, and that comes by way of the Tao, which literally means the way. Confucius often explained that the Tao was not in practice. The socio-political order, with all of its proper ritual and behavior and public behavior, was not being done by the people who were in power. So Confucius said men of virtue and uprightness had to take it upon themselves to protect and to preserve this ideal of all civilization would be doomed. Ren, R-E-N, the benevolence, the humanness, the virtue, a kernel that exists in all human beings, the R-E-N. If someone can persevere and develop Ren, then they could be entrusted to carry out the work of Ren. When that is done, the Tao will grow through self-effort. Outside of family, a person should interact with society as a sense of dutifulness. Li, when Ren will not get it all done. Inner goodness and benevolences has to be carried out through prescribed behavior. It comes through rites, rituals, and normative behavior. Junzi, J-U-N-Z-I, this is a noble man of virtue who carries on the tasks of reviving and preserving the Tao. Let's talk about the religious Analects, the visions of the Analects. Confucius never really spoke of escape from this world or human society, because for Confucius, the afterlife was of little concern. For Confucius, the ultimate goal of humans is to follow the instructions of the Tian and be transformed from potential to actual goodness. The Mencius, Mencius, Master Ming, was born a full century after Confucius, but he also claimed to be the rightful successor of Confucius. He was also called for moral cultivation as a religious calling. Master Ming wrote the Mencius and proclaimed that there are 4 roots: the Ren, R-E-N, which means benevolence; the Yi, Y-I, which means righteousness; the Li, L-I, which means propriety; and the Zhi, S-Z-H-I, which means wisdom. The last 2 texts of Confucius' teachings, Great Learning. It's a practical step-by-step roadmap to self-cultivation, and it outlines the individual and society efforts for the ultimate good. There's also the doctrine of the mean. What Tian has ordained is called human nature, and following that nature is called Tao. Cultivating the Tao is called teaching. In it there are S cardinal relations: father and son, husband and wife, elder and younger brothers, ruler and subject, and friends. Confucius' original vision was to pursue a personal relationship with an ultimate reality through moral improvement. This would culminate in an orderly society and a state according to the Tao, or the way of Tian. For a second, let's talk about Confucianism and women. It is very often seen as a patriarchal ideology and often blamed for the oppression of women in China. The teaching of Taoism, it kind of emerged from ancient Chinese religions such as Confucianism, but instead of Tian being the ultimate absolute, Tao is seen as supreme. The 2 best known and most identifiable Taoists are Master Lao and Master Jing. Master Lao was more a composite figure than the actual person. He was the writer of the Tao Jing, the scripture of the way and potent manifestations. Tao Jing, the Tao Jing, T-A-O-D-E-J-I-N-G, has 81 chapters. Confucian Tao is an ideal, ethical, social, political order ordained by Tian. For the Taoist, it is the Tao that is the basis of natural order. It is the Tao that gives birth like a mother. The ideal course of action and insightful, wise people is to observe the Wu-Wei, W-U-W-E-I, which is actions and intentions, or the Ziran, which is natural spontaneity. Wu-Wei, W-U-W-E-I, it calls for a minimalist, non-invasionist attitude. Ziran rejects artificial and contrived actions. Then there's the Zhunji, Z-H-U-A-N-G-Z-I. It's one of the other sacred texts. The text, the Tao is not only transcendent, the Tao also gives rise to all things. Truly is the core that exists in all things, from the loftiest perfected beings to the broken pieces of tile and excrement. In Taoism, let's talk about their deities. The Tao in later times became Y-U-A-N-S-H-I, F-I-A-N-Z-U-N, or celestial, venerable, or primordial beginning. Taoist deities resided in all things, including humans. They were there to protect the major human organs from decay. Taoism and women. Taoism gave women a better place compared to Confucianism. Taoist goddesses plays a major role in the religion. So let's talk about history of Confucianism and history of Taoism. When Confucius was born, the whole political world was in a chaos. He was born into a family where the father died when he was an infant. He did menial labor to support the family. And 2 groups of people grew to prominence: the Wushi, W-U-S-H-I, who were knights and feudal lords; the Rushi, who were the scribes and the record keepers. And because of his desire for knowledge, Confucius rose to the level of a Rushi. When China was unified as a state, Confucianism became a target of persecution. But it was during the Han Dynasty that Confucianism was lifted to a scholastic tradition. Of course, Neo-Confucianism tradition arose and found its way into Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Let's talk about the history of Taoism. The divine divination of Lao Tzu, Laozi, somewhere in the 2nd century BC, led to the rise of Taoism. After the whole pantheon of deities developed and came to be worshipped as manifestations of Taoism. Like Confucianism, Taoism made its way into the same countries of Asia. In modern times, Taoism has not fared well. And from 1966 to 1976, during the Cultural Revolution, many Taoist shrines and temples were destroyed. There has been some renewal of Taoism in modern times, but mostly outside of main China. Confucianism and Taoism as a way of life. Confucianism as rituals places great emphasis on moral behavior. There is the sacrifice to Tian given by the ruler. It involved 9 steps, including purification, dance, music, reading of prayers and documents, and offering sacrifices. Family rituals to commemorate and honor their ancestors. For Confucius, this was the core of one's humanity. Taoist practices and rituals. For the Taoists, it is always held that beliefs had to be put into practice, into action. There is a need to promote communal harmony, as well as delaying and stopping physical deterioration. There are different rituals in Taoism. The Zhi, or Z-H-A-I, several days of fasting, and the J-I-A-O was a rite of cosmic renewal as a loud and colorful and dramatic ritual.